Percent increase. Now, a percent increase is described by taking the whole. The whole is what you start with, and then you add the percentage or the percentage increase. You can also describe this as 1 because the whole is 100% or 1 plus the percentage divided by 100, which would be in decimal form. So what we're going to look at is what we start with. I like to look at pi, so we're going to start with a pi. Now this pi is going to represent our 100%. This is what we're starting with, is 100%. And then what we're going to do is we're going to increase this by 25%. So what happens when we start with something and we increase it, what we do is we add the 2, and 100% plus 25% equals 125%. Now if we were going to look at this as decimals, 100% can also be written as 1.0. The 25% can be written as 0.25, and when we add those two together, we get 1.25. Now this represents a 25% increase. This 1 is our whole. That's what we're starting with. That's our 100%, our 1. And then this is the 25% increase. So let's look at some other examples. Let's say we increase something by 33%. Then what we do, that is the same thing as taking our whole and then adding the 33% in the form of a decimal, which would be 0.33, and we end up with 1.33. This is our whole, this is our 33% increase. 1.33 represents a 33% increase. Let's look at a 75% increase. We start with our whole, we add the percent increase, and we end up with 1.75. The 1 it represents our whole, our starting amount. This 75 is our 75% increase. Now let's say we increase something by 2.53%. Well, we'd start with our whole. We'd add this to it in the form of a decimal, which would be 0.0253. We'd end up with 1.0253. This is our whole. This would represent a 2.53% increase. Lastly, let's look at if we were something was to increase by 135%. Well, then we'd just do the same process. Start with our whole, add our percentage increase in the form of a decimal. This in the form of a decimal would be 1.35. And so we'd end up with 2.35. Now our still whole, our original whole, our starting amount, 1 is within that, but it's also, this is increased by 135%. Now let's say you have a decimal, like 1.68, and we kind of want to work backwards. We want to say, okay, if we have 1.68, well, how much of a percentage increase would that be? Well, to determine that, what we do is we take away 1, or the original whole, what we started with. And when we do that, we're left with 0.68, and we convert that to a percentage, and we're left with 68%. That results in a 68% increase. So 1.68 is the same thing as a 68% increase. That's our starting, that's our whole, and that's a 68% increase. Let's look at 3.04. How much of a percentage increase would this be? Well, we take away the whole, and what we're left with is 2.04. We turn that into a percentage, and a 3.04 is the same thing as a 204% increase. If we look at the decimal 1.08, how much of a percent increase is that? Well, we take away the whole, and we're left with 0.08, which is a 8% increase. And lastly, if we look at 1.005, what we're going to do is do the same process, take away the whole, and we're left with 0.005 as a decimal, which is we turn that into a percentage. It is 0.5%. It's half of a percent. So this constitutes a half a percentage increase. Now let's look at a particular example. For 3 consecutive, let me get this right, okay. So for 3 consecutive years, the tuition at Tasmania State University has increased by 10% the first year, 15% the second year, and 12% the third year. Now, the question is asking us, what is the overall percentage increase of tuition during the 3-year period? Well, it was increased by 10% the first year. The second year, it was increased by 15%. And then the third year, it was increased by 12%. So what we need to do is convert these to the percentage increase decimals. So we're going to start with the whole. We're going to convert this to a decimal, which would be 0.1 or 0.10, whatever you feel more comfortable with. Now this is going to give us, when we add those together, 1.1 or 1.0, but we don't need the 0, so 1.1 is sufficient. Year 2, and this represents a 10% increase. If I put the 0 there, it's easier to see that's a 10% increase. This is our whole, this is the 10% increase. Now in year 2 is a 15% increase. So we're going to take our original whole, add the percentage increase in the form of a decimal, and we get 1.15. And then year 3, it was increased by 12%, so we're going to take the whole, add the percentage increase in the form of a decimal. So now we have the decimal that includes the whole as well as the percentage increase. Now when it's asking for the overall percentage increase of the tuition during the 3-year period, how you determine the overall percentage increase is you take each one of these decimals and you just multiply them by each other. So we're going to go 1.1 or 1.10, same thing, multiplied by 1.15, multiplied by 1.12, and we end up with, when we do the calculation in a calculator, 1.4168. Now the question is asking for the overall percentage increase. This decimal, what we have to realize is it has the original whole and it has the percentage increase here. So what we need to do is we need to take away that original whole, which was 1. And when we do that, what we're left with is 0.4168. And once we convert this to a percentage, we will have the overall percentage increase over the 3 years. We convert that to a percentage, and it is 41.68%.